this country will rid our planet of ISIS.
We have to look at ISIS as the leading threat of an international terror network.
The world is a very dangerous place, but not too dangerous of a place for the United States of America.
This is an incredibly complicated region of the world.
This world, with American leadership, can and must come together to destroy him.
We've got to understand the complexity of the world that we are facing, and no place is more so than in the Middle East.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Des Moines, Iowa, at Drake University. Thank you for joining us for debate night here on CBSN. The three Democratic candidates have concluded their second presidential debate of this nominating contest. CBS News, of course, brought you that with John Dickerson and his other journalistic colleagues on stage. Now we're going to have the post-game wrap-up here in the spin room. I'm joined by Steve Shigaris, the senior political editor for CBS News, Lynda Tran of 270 Strategies, and Adam Sharp. He's got this great elaborate title with Twitter. Trust me, he's really, really important and very smart about what Twitter has found in our partnership with this debate. Adam, what struck you about the conversation, the flow, and who might have improved their standing as a result of tonight's debate?
Well, I think two things. One, we talked about going into the debate, that share of conversation, which candidate is driving that conversation. And it had narrowed to be almost neck and neck between Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders going into the debate. They held that to the midpoint. Going into that first hour break, 42%, 42%. In the second half, Secretary Clinton pulled ahead a little bit, edging Senator Sanders out by just the slightest bit. And as you can see here on the chart, a lot of that volume actually went to Martin O'Malley, who wound up in the double digits after having been in the 1%, 2%, 3% range in overall conversation going into this debate. The most talked about moment, though, was Hillary Clinton speaking on a variety of issues. 9/11, Wall Street, women donating to her campaign. A lot of reaction to that, including one follow-up tweet that was brought into the debate by the moderator, John Dickerson, and really captures how being able to bring voters into the room changed the cadence of the debate. This was a voter in Iowa City, Iowa, who asked a question on Twitter, had only a few dozen followers, and 8 minutes later, it was being presented to the former Secretary of State and candidate for President of the United States.
So I want to ask about Martin O'Malley because he did trend up as the evening wore on. If you're his campaign, do you say to yourself, victory, or, well, we've got something going finally?
Not quite victory yet. It's still 14%, standing next to 41, 45%, but it is showing growth over the course of the debate. If I'm his people right now, I'm looking at each of those spikes along the way and seeing which were those that went up and went right back down because it's just a good throwaway line at the moment, like his comment about Donald Trump, the carnival barker, and what were those moments where, after he said it, the conversation found a new level and was essentially that step up. Because those are the messages he's going to want to reiterate on the campaign trail to keep building that message.
Adam Sharp, thank you for that. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, because this is Spin Alley, we're going to get some hardcore truth from one of the best spinners in the business. I say that as a compliment. Robbie Mook, campaign manager for Hillary Clinton for president. On the other side of this break, please stay with us. As promised, most consequential person on the stage right now, certainly not me. Robbie Mook, campaign manager for Hillary Clinton for president, and we are joined by Lynda Tran, Steve Shigaris. Robbie, obviously you're going to say a lot of complimentary things about your candidate. One thing she said at the end struck me. A lot of people have been talking about me tonight. I am thinking about you. Did that surprise either her or you that she was so much the focus of tonight's conversation and not always in the most complimentary way?
Well, I think, look, the other candidates came today to make a point and to have a moment on that stage. Hillary Clinton came to talk about how she is going to make life better for middle-class families in this country, how we're going to raise people's wages, how we're going to help them afford college, afford child care, afford those daily costs of living that continue to go up. So you were also, by the way, you saw that she was the only candidate on that stage who pledged not to raise taxes on the middle class. Look, this is who Hillary Clinton is. She is focused on this campaign campaign of being a champion for everyday people, and that's the point she was making there.
$12 minimum wage. Hillary Clinton said yes. Martin O'Malley and Bernie Sanders said no, it's got to be higher, a place of potential vulnerability as this campaign continues.
Well, what Hillary said is that nationally we have to have a $12 minimum wage. If other localities need to raise that higher to deal with the cost of living, that they should absolutely do that. And not at all. I mean, this is central to her fight, which is raising wages for working families and middle-class people in this country.
Steve Shigaris.
Republicans are having a field day with the fact that she didn't say the words radical Islam. I want to know what your reaction to that is, and why didn't she say those words?
Well, look, what really matters here is that families in this country are safe. And so the question on voters' minds as they were looking up there to select a nominee is who's going to be our next commander-in-chief. And I think what was abundantly clear is that Hillary Clinton has both the experience. You talked about how she was part of the decision, whether to go after bin Laden, those meetings in the Situation Room. She is the candidate who has the experience, has the record, and the determination to keep families safe here.
But Republicans are obviously going to use this term as a punching bag for her. How do you prevent that from continuing? Do you just at some point do you give in, and why wouldn't you give in?
Well, look, what we've heard again and again in these Republicans debate is the vitriol, the racism, the bigoted comments. Of course, they're going to say all kinds of things, and I can't speak for them. What I can say is that Hillary Clinton made very clear this is not a war against Islam. This is not a war against Muslims in this country. This is a fight to keep people safe, a fight against ISIS. That she was very clear about.
Does she think that the term radical Islam is racist?
Well, I'm going to let her, speak for herself in the debate. But again, she was very focused on this is not a war on Muslim Americans. This is not a war on Islam. This is a war against ISIS.
Lynda, go ahead, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So Secretary Clinton made very clear in some of her references that she knew she was in Iowa and that she was talking to Iowans. A little bit earlier, there was some conjecture about what the ground game might be. Can you give us a glimpse into what to expect here in this important state?
Well, absolutely. We're really proud of the organization that we've built here on the ground. And what's been really exciting is how Secretary Clinton was really a central part of that effort. She spent hundreds of hours doing small organizing events across the state in in dozens of counties. And that work was done over the summer, and we're just starting to see the fruits of all that work she did. Small meetings, one-on-one, talking with people, answering their questions. We have thousands of active, eager, excited volunteers across the state. They're going to be in those caucus rooms, rallying people behind her and winning delegates.
Robbie, let me ask you this before we let you go. And it's not a softball question, but it's a contextual question that may feel or sound like a softball. The polling indicates in the last 6 weeks, if not a tidal shift in this race, a perceptible shift toward Hillary Clinton. You're never going to tell us that this race is over, but do you believe it's in a fundamentally different place than it was 6 weeks ago, and that it's unlikely to go back to the place it was before, much more competitive?
Well, I think there's two things. First of all, she has articulated a number of policies which, again, are focused on helping to raise wages for the middle class, and we're seeing that voters are really responding to that. But secondly, I really ignore the polls, particularly in a state like Iowa, where this is all about person-to-person, on-the-ground organizing. And so, the good poll numbers are great and fine. What really matters to us is how many volunteers do we have signed up, ready to go in those caucus rooms. We feel really good about those numbers, and that's what matters right now.
Robbie Mook, thanks for joining us. I know you've got a busy night and a lot of work to do after this debate.
Thank you.
There's never ending work in a presidential campaign, and Robbie likes to do it. Thanks for joining us.
Take care. Thanks.
Going to take a break. When we come back, Jeff Weaver, campaign manager for Bernie Sanders, will be joining us here in the spin room on the set. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a second.
So you've received millions of dollars in contributions and speaking fees from Wall Street companies. How do you convince voters that you're going to level the playing field when you're indebted to some of its biggest players?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that they know that I will. You've got two billionaire hedge fund managers who started a super PAC, and they're advertising against me in Iowa as we speak. So they clearly think I'm going to do what I say I will do, and you can look at what I did in the Senate. I did introduce legislation to rein in compensation. I looked at ways that the shareholders would have more control over what was going on in that arena, and specifically said to Wall Street that what they were doing in the mortgage market was bringing our country down.
Senator Sanders, you've said that the donations to Secretary Clinton are compromising. So what do you think of her answer?
Not good enough. Look, I have never heard a candidate, never, who has received huge amounts of money from oil, from coal, from Wall Street, from the military-industrial complex. Not one candidate said, oh, these campaign contributions will not influence me. I'm going to be independent. Well, why do they make millions of dollars of campaign contributions? They expect to get something. Everybody knows that. Once again, I am running a campaign differently than any other candidate. We are relying on small campaign donors, 750,000 of them, $30 a piece. That's who I'm indebted to.
Well, John, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Personal
Look,
privilege.
He has
Secretary Clinton gets to
used his
respond.
answer to impugn my integrity. Let's be
No, I have
frank
not.
here. Oh, wait a minute, Senator. But I look very carefully at your proposal. Reinstating Glass-Steagall is a part of what very well could help, but it is nowhere near enough. My proposal is tougher, more effective, and more comprehensive because I go after all of Wall Street, not just the big banks.
John, please.
A telling and memorable exchange between former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, Senator from Vermont. We are joined on our set here at the Drake University Spin Room after the presidential debate by Jeff Weaver, campaign manager for the aforementioned Senator Sanders.
Hey, how are you?
Thanks for joining us. It's great to have you here. The importance of that exchange, not only when it happened, but how you will continue to talk about it in this campaign and what you will tell voters likely to participate in Democratic caucuses here and in primaries afterwards, what it means to differentiate between the two candidates.
Look, the central issue of this campaign is that we have a rigged economy. People understand that. And that rigged economy is held up by a corrupt political system fueled by the contributions of large corporations and wealthy people, primarily through super PACs. Senator Sanders is running a campaign fueled by 750,000 individual donors, over 1.5 million contributions, averaging $30 apiece. When he's president of the United States, the people he is going to answer to are the 750,000 people and all the rest of the middle income and working class people in this country, and not large campaign contributors.
Did Senator Sanders impugn Secretary Clinton's integrity, and will he continue to do so?
No, it is not. He is not impugning her integrity. What he is impugning is a corrupt political system which has kept this country in its grip. It is time for the American people to have their government back.
Is she just an innocent captive of that corrupt system, or is she a willing and active and conscious participant?
Well, you'll have to ask her about that. But what I can tell you, that's not what I think is not important. It's what the voters think. What is important is that Senator Sanders is not just talking the talk. He's walking the walk. He's the only candidate on that stage without a super PAC. He's been attacked by both of their super PACs. He is running a campaign fueled by the small contributions of working class and middle class people in this country, and that's who he's beholden to.
I'm going to bring Steve and Lynda into the conversation in a second, but I want all of us to take a look at something that was also significant that came up. This is Soundbite. We're going to do this in kind of a technologically simple way, folks. Soundbite number 5. This is Bernie Sanders referring to something I didn't know of in American history. The noted socialist, Dwight David Eisenhower. Let's roll it.
How high would you go? You've said before you'd go above 50%. How high?
We haven't come up with an exact number yet, but it will not be as high as the number under Dwight D. Eisenhower, which was 90%. But it will be. I'm not that much of a socialist compared to Eisenhower. But we are going to end the absurdity, as Warren Buffett often reminds us.
That's right.
That billionaires pay an effective tax rate lower than nurses or truck drivers. That makes no sense at all.
A very good line. Got a tremendous reaction from the crowd. But let's get to the specifics. Why don't you have a number? Why don't you have a percentage?
So we're working on a proposal for individual tax rates. But let me say this. All of the proposals that we have out there, free college tuition, the $1 trillion to rebuild our infrastructure, the paid family medical leave, we have tax proposals to pay for every single one of those proposals. And I can certainly provide it to you, and we have many times. So we're
I'm sure it's on the website.
You can go to BernieSanders.com and find it right there.
Nice
but
plug.
we pay for all of it, right? And it's paid for by taxes on large corporations and wealthy people almost exclusively.
Steve Shigeris, please join the
So
conversation.
you're not going to raise taxes on middle class. You're not going to raise taxes on anybody but the wealthiest.
Well, so I would say the one exception is he's a strong supporter of the bill that's put in by Senator Gillibrand in the Senate. Has 19 co-sponsors. The House version has over 100 co-sponsors. It would provide 12 weeks of paid vacation or paid family and medical leave at 67% pay. That would cost the average American $1.38 a week. So that's it.
And you would argue that's worth it?
Well, I think women who have babies who don't have great benefits at their work would be able to stay home for 12 weeks. I think, I don't want to speak for everybody, but it sounds like a good deal for $1.38 a week.
Lynda Tran?
Yeah, so heading into the debate, obviously one of the most talked about lines from last go-round was the damn emails line. And I'll tell you, I was a little surprised. It seemed like Senator Sanders was kind of doing it all over again and letting Secretary Clinton off the hook on that. Was that something you discussed in advance? Or?
No. Look, I mean, he said tonight what he said in the last debate and what he said in interviews before and after that last debate, which is he doesn't want the political discussion in this country dominated by a discussion of her emails. There's a process going on. The FBI is investigating her emails. Whatever comes out of it, comes out of it. But let's have a discussion about the important issues facing the country.
Steve?
So what was your main goal going into the debate tonight, and did Senator Sanders meet that goal?
Look, I think if you watch this, anybody watching this debate fairly has to say that he is really setting the agenda, not just in this debate, but in this election. The issues that he is talking about, the issues that he wants to address, are the issues that all the other candidates are scrambling to try to do. I didn't do a count, but I think if you went through the tape and counted up the number of I agree with Senator Sanders, there'd be quite a few in this tape.
Jeff, I want to talk to you about something that the senator has referred to, the revolution that he wants to bring about. The political revolution. The first presidential campaign I covered was 1992. In the Democratic primary, Jerry Brown said exactly the same thing. Dennis Kucinich said things relatively similar to that. Barack Obama didn't say it in those terms, but he did make a big deal, understandably and justifiably so, about a different initial source of fundraising. Then that sort of morphed over to more traditional. The point I'm trying to drive at is this is not a new conversation in this country. And what always seems to get in the way is the sense that voters have that it sounds good, some participate, but they just don't believe it's possible. Is it possible?
Yeah, well, we're showing it's possible. It's not just about is it possible in the abstract. We're showing it's possible, and it's driven largely now by the ability to raise small dollar contributions on the internet. If you look at the last fundraising period, we raised almost as much money as Secretary Clinton did, but all through small contributions online. Our donors, I have very, very few in this campaign who are maxed out donors, in a couple of hundred out of 750,000 donors. Those donors are able to give to us numerous times. So this campaign, unlike many insurgent campaigns in the past, this campaign has access to the financial resources to go the distance. I mean, often in the past, you've had a campaign which could raise a little bit of money. Even if they did well in Iowa and New Hampshire, they had no way to replenish that money afterward to go into the states that followed. This campaign is not like that. We have the ability to go the distance financially and go toe-to-toe with the Clinton campaign.
And we will watch that process as it unfolds. Jeff Weaver, thank you so much for joining us on stage.
Thank you.
Twice with us tonight. We deeply appreciate it. We'll see you down the road. Safe travels.
Thank you.
So we've had two campaign managers. Now we're going to have a candidate. Martin O'Malley, former governor of Maryland, who punched above his weight, at least according to Twitter, during this debate, will join us here in the spin room. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
The fact of the matter is, and let's say it in our debate because you'll never hear this from that immigrant bashing carnival barker Donald Trump, the truth of the matter is, net immigration from Mexico last year was 0. Fact check me. Go ahead, check it out. But the truth of the matter is, if we want wages to go up, we've got to get 11 million of our neighbors out of the off-the-book shadow economy and into the full light of an American economy.
According to Twitter, that was by far the most talked about soundbite, if you will, from former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley. That is a bump shot of the spin room here at Drake University. Now we're coming full to our set, and we welcome to it the aforementioned former governor of Maryland, Martin O'Malley.
Hey, Major.
Governor O'Malley, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, what is the importance of that soundbite for you and your campaign? And are you happy that's your most tweeted moment of the night, or do you wish others would have been more tweeted?
No, look, I thought tonight went great for our campaign. I mean, we were able to make our case that in our American economy, it's all about inclusion. And to be able to make that point on immigration, especially in these times when we're all understandably have a lot of fears after what's happened in France, but to be able to just say very clearly that, look, we are made better by immigration. We are made better by new Americans in every generation. So I thought it was a very good night for us. We made our case. We need new leadership. We need an inclusive economy. And I'm pretty excited about this because our party always gravitates to the future. And we were able to make our case that alone on that stage, I've actually gotten so many of these things done.
When you talk about inclusion and a message that can possibly unify the country, there are those who have been drawn, for whatever reason, to some of the messaging from Donald Trump and other Republicans that want tougher border security. Can you be inclusive when you imply, at least at an indirect level, that they're motivated by racism?
Well, look, I think when anyone in the public arena says the sort of racist blanket things that Donald Trump says about others, in his case, all Mexicans, many of whose families have been here for 200 or 300 years, probably longer than some of Donald Trump's ancestors have been. I think all of us have a responsibility to push back. That kind of language, that kind of vilification, his call for creating swoop-up squads, I mean, it's this close to ethnic cleansing, and it's wrong, and it has no place in Americans' public discourse in the office for president.
I also want to play a soundbite for our audience, something at a moment that I believe struck a lot of people in the audience and certainly caught my attention. This is in the control room, soundbite number 1. It's a reference to boots on the ground overseas. Let's play that.
Is the world too dangerous a place for a governor who has no foreign policy experience?
John, the world is a very dangerous place, but the world is not too dangerous of a place for the United States of America, provided we act according to our principles, provided we act intelligently. I was in Burlington, Iowa, and a mom of a service member of ours who served 2 duties in Iraq said, "Governor O'Malley, please, when you're with your other candidates and colleagues on stage, please don't use the term boots on the ground. Please don't use the term boots on the ground. My son is not a pair of boots on the ground. These are American soldiers. And we fail them when we fail to take into account what happens the day after a dictator falls, and when we fail to act with a whole-of-government approach with sustainable development, diplomacy, and our economic power in alignment with our principles."
So, Governor, I'll give you another chance. Do you have the mettle it takes to be commander-in-chief, to face the very serious national security challenges posed by what we saw in Paris not 24 hours ago and whatever may come next?
Yes, I do. And if I didn't, I would not be running, Major. Every year since the attacks of September 11th, my colleagues, Democratic and Republican mayors, and then my colleagues, Democratic and Republican governors, chose me to be one of their 2 leaders every single year on Homeland Security and preparedness. This is an issue that I have taken a passionate interest in ever since those attacks on September 11th. Being a big city mayor, I mean, the attitude, you can remember it at the time, it was, where's the next shoe? Look up, look down, look left, look right. And we made our city a leader. We felt on that date, we had the attacks in New York, we had in Pennsylvania, Flight 93, and then we had the Pentagon where we lost so many Marylanders in those attacks. So this is something that I have worked on, particularly these issues of terrorism and protecting the homeland, nonstop for the last decade or more. So
Steve Shigaris, our political editor, please jump in.
In this context of the former mayor of Baltimore versus the Secretary of State, how do you convince Democrats who, by the way, in our last poll, 53% of Democratic primary voters are very confident in Hillary Clinton's ability to handle international crisis? How do you convince Democratic voters that you are a better choice in these kinds of situations than Hillary Clinton?
You do it one state at a time, beginning with Iowa, followed by New Hampshire. And when I've traveled around both Iowa and New Hampshire and other places, heads nod when I say there is no area of American policy in greater need of fresh thinking than American foreign policy. It's not about just looking around for the next dictator to topple. It's about a whole of government approach. It's about sustainable development, our economic powers, and I think that's frankly been lacking over these last 10, 15 years. And I believe that Secretary Clinton has a very quick reflex to always grab for the military tool. And I believe that we can't afford to do that as a nation. We have to be in front of these threats before they rise to a level where we're backed into military corners. We need to invest in human intelligence. We need to recognize that we have a global commons to defend now in so many ways, including cybersecurity. These are the new realities of the new century. This is not the world of the 1990s. This is not the 20th century world of conflict. This is a new era of conflict and warfare, and it requires new thinking and new leadership.
Do you feel as a former governor that you have to prove to Democratic voters your breadth of knowledge on this subject, and how do you go about doing that?
Well, I think it's certainly fair for them to ask, as they do when every time I'm up and engaging in a search for better answers with my neighbors. We have had many governors who have served in the office of President of the United States, including Franklin Roosevelt and Bill Clinton and many others who didn't necessarily have the resume of having been Secretary of State, but that did not mean they weren't capable of leading. On the contrary, these are leaders who understood what executive leadership's about, and that's particularly important in the international area. I'm very clear about my principles, and I'm clear about our country's principles.
Lynda, want to jump in, please?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, you obviously had some bright and shining moments tonight, and your slogan says it all, actions, not words. Seems like you've been able to get that across. My question is, how are you planning to capitalize on some of this newfound energy tonight, and are you going to shift your strategy at all based on it?
Yeah, well, we have about 37 staffers on the ground here in Iowa, and no challenger. When you look back at one of the truths about Iowa is that the polls in November never look anything like what the decision is on caucus night. And that's been a rule that's held true every year. We now have an opportunity as a campaign to make our case for generational change and the need for new leadership in Washington that can get things done in ways that I think are going to draw very, very stark contrast between Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders. People do not believe that we're going to be able to solve our problems or move our country out of these rather divided and polarized times by either resorting to a debate about the pros and cons of socialism or by returning to a very polarized leader in Secretary Clinton, who said in the last debate, quite famously, that she considers that she's proudest of the fact that Republicans are her enemies. I don't believe that Republicans are our enemies. I believe that there are our friends, they're our colleagues, they're our uncles, they're the paramedic that comes sometimes when you have to dial 911. I believe we're all in this together, and I believe that that's the larger attitude of especially where our country's headed and her younger people.
Governor O'Malley, I want to play another soundbite from the debate, something that Hillary Clinton said in the conversation that's getting a lot of traction online post-debate about the terminology radical Islam. Let's play that and have a conversation on the other side.
I don't think we're at war with Islam. I don't think we're at war with all Muslims. I think we're at war with jihadists who have...
Just to interrupt, he didn't say all Muslims. He just said radical Islam. Is that a phrase you don't...
I think that you can talk about Islamists who clearly are also jihadists, but I think it's not particularly helpful to make the case that Senator Sanders was just making, that I agree with, that we've got to reach out to Muslim countries, we've got to have them be part of our coalition. If they hear people running for president who basically shortcut it to say we are somehow against Islam.
So, Governor O'Malley, it's no surprise to you. You've heard this on the campaign trail from Republicans to the degree that you have time to sift through all the things that they say. That one of the problems in this conflict with terrorism is President Obama and other Democrats refuse to call it by the name they say it is. Radical jihadism, radical Islam. Do you think that's a relevant part of this conversation? And you just implied a moment ago that Hillary Clinton is too prone to reach for military solutions. Is that a point of criticism, and how do you really differentiate yourself between her and you on that point?
Yeah, first of all, on the language, I think the more accurate language, I wasn't aware that this is the latest sort of ha-ha, gotcha, set a trap thing from the Republican candidates. I believe that the most accurate term is radical jihadists. So I think that's a better term to use. Look, these brutal, ruthless, genocidal actors in ISIL, I mean, they're also kind of equal opportunity murderers. I mean, they talk to the Chaldean Christians, Christians, Jews, Muslims. They are an apocalyptic group. They need to be confronted, and they are also perverting the name of a great world religion. We need now more than ever to understand that that the vast majority of Muslim Americans are our front lines in this battle. On Secretary Clinton and her and my differences with her, I think we've lacked a whole of government approach. I think that we fail our military.
And by that, what do you mean?
I mean that we should not wait until problems become so large that the only options that we appear to have is grabbing for the military tool. I also believe that it is irresponsible to get involved in the toppling of a dictator without asking what is the next step after this. There's more to building up a sustainable democracy than simply knocking over a dictator. I mean, look at the mess that has been made and the cascading effects of that blunder, that horrible decision to actually invade Iraq, something that Secretary Clinton voted for. It's hard to look back on the cascading effects of that and say that we actually applied a whole of government approach. Secretary Clinton said today, we left an Iraqi army in place that was capable of defending Iraq. Well, actually, it wasn't. It wasn't. And it's been proven that it wasn't. So we need to do better as a nation. Our mission in the world is not to go roaming the planet looking for monsters to destroy. But we do need to confront evil when it rises and it has the sort of reach that now ISIL has. This is an imperfect and dangerous world, but our way through it is not to put everything on the back of our military. We need to use our economic, our diplomatic, and we need to rebuild the human intelligence on the ground that has, for some reason, been shown time and time again not to have the capacity that it should for a great nation.
Former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley, thank you very much for joining us. Three candidates on stage. Only one of them had the bravery to come up here and talk to us afterwards. You were it. When this debate started on Twitter, former Governor O'Malley was pulling 4% of the conversation. When the debate ended, it was 15%.
All right.
That's a move up. I don't know what it indicates.
It's a 300% improvement.
It's his job to find out, and that's going to be some of the work he'll do going forward. Safe travels to you, Governor. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thanks a lot.
When we come back on the other side of the break, Iowa pollster Ann Selzer, an expert on Iowa politics, coming up next. Stay with us.
Secretary Clinton, you've been on three sides of this. When you ran in 2000, you said that we needed federal robust regulations. Then, in 2008, you were portraying yourself as Annie Oakley and saying that we don't need those regulations on the federal level. And now you come back around here. So, John, there's a big difference between leading by polls and leading with principle. We got it done in my state by leading with principle, and that's what we need to do as a party for comprehensive gun safety.
I believe, coming from a state that has virtually no gun control, I believe that I am in position to reach out to the 60 or 70% of the American people who agree with us on those issues. The problem is people all over this country, not you, Secretary Clinton, are shouting at each other. And what we need to do is bring people together to work on the agreement where there is broad consensus, and that's what I intend.
I'd like to take a matter of personal privilege here.
There is broad consensus. 92% in the most recent poll of Americans want gun safety measures.
Absolutely.
And 85% of gun owners agree.
Yes.
We've got the consensus. What we're lacking is political leadership.
Yes.
And that's what you and others can start providing in the Senate.
I agree.
Welcome back to the Spin Room here at Drake University. Behind me, you can see the crowds. They're spinning, spinning, spinning like a home blender. making margaritas in Key West on a hot summer afternoon. At any rate.
Sounds good.
Sounds good, doesn't it? Not to suggest I'm thirsty or inclined to any alcohol right now, folks, but maybe, just maybe I am. Ann Selzer joins us back here on stage. Your impressions, I just want to get what you absorbed, what you saw, and what you believe here in Iowa will matter after this debate is in the papers tomorrow and in the memories of Iowa Democratic voters.
Well, you have to understand, I love debates, and I love them maybe not so much for what happens tonight, but what happens as things flutter down. The American electorate, the Iowa caucus-going electorate, listen to a bunch of ideas, a bunch of positions, but they're trying to take the measure of the candidate. So really, what sticks is what we'll find out in the days and weeks to come, what sticks. I think you had a very somber mood at the beginning, and a lot of complexity without a lot of very clear, unambiguous ideas coming out of that. And that seems kind of normal, but we'll see who rises as sounding like the kind of leader who could take on that complexity from that. And then they pivoted to talk about, well, how are we different from Republicans, and what are we going to do for you, the American people? So I think those were the three themes, ultimately, that voters are going to be weighing. Who do I want to represent Democrats in the election? Who do I want to lead this nation? And for some, that might be a conflict.
On the domestic issues conversation, gun control, Wall Street regulation, just to name two, there was, I thought, and I think all of us thought, a surprising degree of feistiness among the candidates. Clearly, when it was national security, the reaction to Paris, very somber and deferential, and as you said, no clear delineations or big differences. But on some of these underlying domestic issues, there was. There's this long-standing assumption that Iowans are somehow made uncomfortable by feistiness. True, not true? And do you think that feistiness will help anyone in particular here, or just advance the debate on the issues itself?
Well, I think there's a certain amount of feistiness that we're all interested in, so I don't know that anybody crossed the line there. I think that the two issues you mentioned, Wall Street and guns, have been areas that distinguish Secretary Clinton from Senator Sanders. That is, we had a poll not too long ago where we said Bernie Sanders has a problem with caucus goers, and it isn't that he calls himself a socialist, it's that there are areas in the gun debate that have sort of made people think, well, I don't know that I agree with that. So I wasn't surprised to see guns come up there. And similarly, there's a claim about Senator Clinton, Secretary Clinton, and her ties to Wall Street. And so, of course, they have to find ways that they're not the same. Otherwise, you just vote for all of the above.
Which we never do in this country, and certainly never in the Iowa caucuses, that's for sure. Steve Shigaris, please join us.
Take us through the trickle-down effect of a debate on polling. How long does it take for it to show up in polls? If there's a spike, how long does that take to sort of dissipate? And then, just take us through that process.
There can be an immediate effect. I mean, I think you saw in the Republican debate with Carly Fiorina, there was an instant reaction to how well she did, and there was a surge for her. But then that surge didn't last. So for a debate like this, where things maybe there weren't as many punch points that sort of everything came to a stop as a comment was made, it may take a while for, as the real spinners, I'm not a spinner, but the real spinners start saying, here's what mattered, and then what the campaigns do with it.
What do you think you'll see in some of the initial polls over the next couple of weeks? What as a takeaway from the debate? I'm not saying specific spikes or whatever, but what will you notice as a pollster in the responses the next couple of weeks?
Well, we obviously look at the horse race and see what's happening there, but we also, in terms of who would be best, who would do the best job of stepping up to terrorism, who would do the best job at negotiating with Congress. I mean, there are very specific things that they talked about tonight, and we'll see if one candidate or another moved in a positive upward direction.
Earlier tonight, we talked some about millennial voters and where they kind of fall on the spectrum of perceptions. Did you see anything tonight during the debate that would make you think that opinion would shift?
Well, again, I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not in that business.
But you do have an 8-ball.
But I do have an 8-ball, and outlook hazy, try again later. I do think that a lot of the talk about what is happening with college education and how to deal with that is designed somewhat for the millennials who are dealing with it now, but also for their parents who are also dealing with it now, as Martin O'Malley apparently is going to be paying the monthly bills for his children. So I think any of those issues that are going to minimum wage, to going to the economy, going to the idea of can you move up, or do we have a stagnant economy, all of that speaks to people, especially at the young side of things, who are hoping for a brighter future.
Ann Selzer, our conversation this evening has been added to entirely by your presence, and we thank you. 3 times on set, every time adding value each and every step of the way. We're going to go to a break now. When we come back, we're going to really get into the Twitter data with our man, Adam Sharp, all things Twitter, our partner here, analytics, data, conversation. He's going to break it down. You're not going to want to miss it. Stay with us. Back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Spin Room here at Drake University. You know, when I grow up, I have no idea when that's going to be, but when I grow up, I hope I have a title as cool as Adam Sharp's. I can't remember all the things, but there's a lot of things, really cool sounding things, all with Twitter. Adam, we've got 3 minutes. Tell us the most important aspects of this debate as measured and measurable on Twitter.
I think there are a couple of things. I think, number one, we saw a shift of conversation, as we expected, of going into this debate talking about national security. But for candidates who might not have wanted to stay focused on that, there was also some optimism in that the electorate is still focused on other issues. When the moderator, John Dickerson, changed topics and brought them in other places, you saw the audience follow along with them. This wasn't a moment where people were saying, go back to Paris, go back to Paris. People realized that this is a buffet of issues and we need a bite of all of them. So you saw a lot of conversation about gun issues. You saw a lot of conversation about Wall Street. That moment when Hillary Clinton answered the question about 9/11 and the follow-up that came from an Iowa City vote in what...
Via Twitter. Brought right into the conversation.
Exactly. And that was sort of the magical moment. We talked a lot before here that, you know, CBS 55 years ago was the first one to put debates on TV. Tonight was another first. Here is somebody who was sitting in Iowa City, Iowa, who had a follow-up question. They tweeted it to their 100 followers, and 8 minutes later, the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States was answering it on national television. That's a groundbreaking moment. We also looked at what were the tweets that were seeing engagement, because all 3 campaigns were live tweeting over the course of the night, punching the lines that they thought were most important to revisit and redistribute. Easily into the thousands of retweets across the 3 accounts for their top tweets. Bernie Sanders being the most retweeted when he put out a message about gun control, that being his most successful message of the night. We should note there, however, he also was one of the most invested in promoting those tweets on Twitter. Essentially an ad campaign to buy some extra amplification of his message, which is also an indicator of the changing advertising space in presidential campaigns. This is not looking at a debate, seeing what's working, going back, writing a script, getting a spot in the can, and hopefully you get on the air tomorrow night. This was putting the money behind an ad that could hit social media the moment he talks about it and be retweeted by 3,000 people.
Adam Sharp, fantastic. I want to put in a word for John Dickerson. He trended on Twitter all night for all the right reasons. Sometimes moderators become part of the story. Sometimes they drive the conversation exactly where voters want it to go. John Dickerson, Nancy Cordes, my colleague, the entire CBS team did precisely that. We've been here all night. This is sort of a Starship Enterprise for us here, but like every enterprise, real and imagined, there's always someone in a control room somewhere in a far distant galaxy waiting in case the whole thing falls apart. Tonight, Vladimir Duthiers in New York was at that other place, waiting just to see if this would all crash and burn. Probably watching me, you thought many times it did, Vlad, even though you did not have to actually intervene.
No, I did not have to intervene, Major. You did. Yeah,
I drank your impressions in New York.
I drank a lot of Diet Coke, drank a lot of coffee, and I listened to you. In the same way that you gave props to John Dickerson, I have to give you props, sir. You did a fantastic job driving the conversation on CBSN. I was watching Twitter the whole time. People were talking about our coverage, about your coverage. It was fantastic, and I knew I wouldn't have to do anything. It's just enjoy the what did you call it? The cinema verite.
So from where you sat, Vlad, did you find this debate to be different than you expected? Were you interested, as we all were, in the shift to domestic issues, creating a kind of not combustibility, but certainly some intensity on that debate stage that I wasn't expecting?
There was a lot of intensity, and it was a debate that I think a lot of people on Twitter, I saw people reacting to the very substantive discussion that was being led by John Dickerson. And interestingly enough, the Republican candidates for president were also tweeting throughout this debate. In fact, Reince Priebus, the RNC chair, just sent out an email and a tweet about this debate, and he called Hillary Clinton's comments on Wall Street, equating her questions about Wall Street and her campaign donations and using 9/11 as a way to dodge that. He calls that, what he is saying, is a new low for Secretary Clinton. So a lot of the RNC members and a lot of the GOP candidates were also tweeting throughout this debate, and they had a lot of questions. And I think that with the fireworks that we saw on the stage today proved that it was a very substantive debate.
Vlad, thank you for that. Thank you for being in our command center in New York and being ready, willing, and able to inherit all of this if it had crashed and burned. We're glad it didn't, but we're very glad you were there. So,
thanks.
I've been in this chair more or less since 6 o'clock Eastern time. I think that's when we started. Maybe it was 4 days ago. I actually forgotten. But anyway, thank you for joining us for CBSN Debate Night. And a special thanks to Adam Sharp, Lynda Tran, Steve Shigaris for hanging with us for however many hours we were doing this. A 48-hour special, Paris Under Attack, comes up, and then we'll be right back.